Hey guys, do you want to turn this into this? Alright, so in this video, we're going to learn how to master your song using a reference track. And for this, we're going to use the plugin called Isotope Ozone. Now, we're going to be using the most basic and foundational parts to make a master. We're not going to be using, for example, the exciter. Even though it has its place, we're going to be using mainly the equalizer, the dynamics, and the maximizer. So first of all, let's take the equalizer. And as we can see, it has the normal parameters as a normal equalizer. It has mid-side, left-right, and a couple more features. Of course, different shapes, different slopes. And what we're going to look at today is a very special feature, which is the matching feature. Okay. So what we can do with this feature is we have a source curve and a target curve. This means the target curve is going to be our reference track. This is going to be our track. And with these two parameters, we're going to transform our EQ in order to mimic the reference track. Okay, so in order to do this, what we're going to do first is, right now I'm doing the master in a track called pre-master, which is here. So every single track is running through the pre-master before it goes to the master. Therefore, our reference track, in order to capture it, is going to have to go to that same track. So we're going to send it to the pre-master. We're going to hit capture. And we're going to play it. That's more or less done. We're going to stop it. And here we have the curve that we want to mimic. Okay. We're going to send it to the master again. Where are you? Here. Okay. And now, of course, we're going to capture our own song. We're going to hit capture here. Of course, it has to be sending to this track that we're putting our ozone in. And as you can see, it is actually not too far away from the target curve. This is actually a good sign. It means that the mix is pretty decent. So what we're gonna do here is, of course, turn on the matching here, the left bottom, and we're gonna start moving these two parameters here. This, of course, is the smoothness of the curve, which in my opinion should be a pretty high level. So probably 80% is pretty good. So when you start seeing that the curve loses its grittiness, it becomes a smooth curve, then you can leave it at there. I think 80% looks pretty good. And with the amount, I would advise you not to go over maybe 3 dBs. So not go over this imaginary line over here. Okay. Keep it at around +2, -2 dBs, +3, -3. So we're going to leave it around there. Now, of course, this has created a weird peak here, which we're going to get rid of because we are going to actually high pass it flat. So we're going to put that at maybe 20 Hertz. Okay. You should probably always put a high pass at a very, very low end. because those frequencies, you do not hear them, but they affect the sound equipment that your song is on, right? So next up, we're gonna go to the dynamics. Now with the dynamics, I tend to have a very specific strategy that tends to work very well. So what I do is I'm gonna leave these bands as they are. They're pretty decent as they are. And we are gonna solo each band and work with it individually. Let's see. Okay, so what we're trying to find is the lowest peak and the highest peak, okay? We're gonna try to find where this white line ends up being at the lowest peak, and we're gonna put our threshold around there. So around there is a pretty good point to put it at. And the ratio for the sub, you usually want a pretty high ratio. You can't, you can compress it pretty hard and it's not gonna destroy the sound. So I tend to go at around 8, okay? So we're gonna see at the RMS how it's doing. Okay, so it's compressing by around 1 RMS. And now we're gonna go to the rest of the bands. In this one, I'm gonna choose 2, ratio 2, because in this band, most of the song is actually happening. And if you compress it too much, it's gonna show on the final track. I think that's a pretty good point to put it at. Then we're gonna go to this band, of course. In this band, we're gonna choose ratio 4. And in the last band, we're gonna choose ratio 6. Now, of course, you can play with the ratios here, but I'm just giving you a general starting point for everything. All right, so that's more or less our dynamics. Okay, so next up we have post EQ. Now with this, we're gonna basically give it our last subtle touches to the EQ. We're not gonna make huge changes here, but just little changes. So I've been fiddling with this song for quite a while. So I pretty much know that it's gonna need a little bit of EQ around this part and a little bit of EQ around this. Now, again, I know this because I've been listening to this song for hours. Mastering is not something that you have to do in 10 minutes like in this video. But yeah, I know that this is gonna be a pretty good point to set up our EQ. Remember, you don't have to have huge impact on this type of EQs in order to make them sound better. And for our last effect, we're gonna use the maximizer. You always wanna use your limiter. Maximizer is a limiter. You always wanna use it last in the chain. So first of all, the mode in Ozone, it depends. It's obviously up for preference, but in this video, I'm going to use the, this is the one that uses less CPU. So for the purpose of the video, I'm going to use this to make my CPU work less. But you can use, usually the newer ones, so the RC4 Modern or something like that, they tend to work really well. But this also works pretty well as well. We're going to turn on true peak and we're going to decrease the ceiling to -0.3. Why do we do this? Okay, when you're limiting a sound, it is not going to be a perfect exact limit at that point. Okay, some peaks are going to actually pass through the threshold. So what you want to do is give it 0.3 dBs of space in order to give it room for error, okay? Now, for how fast or slow it is, this is more or less the release time. If you go lower, the release is going to be shorter, and you might start hearing things like saturation, clipping, stuff like that. If you go higher, you're going to start hearing artifacts like volume fluctuations, more longer term artifacts. Now, every time you limit or you compress, you're going to create some type of artifact. And what you want to do is balance it and minimize the bad parts of the sound, okay? So this is more or less how much you're willing to give up and what sounds good to you, basically. Stereo independence, we're not going to do it. We're going to leave it dependent, because if you choose stereo independence, it's going to mess with how you set up your stereo to be. So if you make a sound be more on the right, this would push it more to the center, right? So I tend to leave this just as default, and this I leave it as default as well, because sometimes it destroys the sound completely. So for the threshold, which is pretty much the most important part, I know for a fact, because I've already tested it with the Virtual Riot song, that the RMS are going to reach -3 and are going to stay around -3, okay? So what I'm going to do with my song is I'm just going to go to about -3 dB. That's it. So we're going to play it. So more or less at around -7.6 dB, -8. This is going to be different for your song, for how loud you want to get, for what your reference track is. This is going to be different for everyone. But now we have a general understanding of how our master works. Okay, so for this video, I'm going to leave it as it is, and we're going to play it and see how it sounds. Of course, we could be doing more things and listening to it and being more precise, but in a 10-minute video, we can't get much more precise than this. All right, and that's the master track. If you like this method, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And yeah, guys, see you in the next video.